Hello and welcome to the fourth episode of Scroll Ideas. If you've been under a rock and don't know what Scroll Ideas is, let me tell you. It's a new show by Scroll where every episode will be taking an issue or an idea that Indians are debating and discussing. And over the course of an hour, we'll really go through it, chew it up, and see it from every angle possible with a particularly brainy guest. And you'll be doing all of this with me, your host, Shoaib Daniyal. For this episode, I'm very pleased to welcome Mr. Ruben Banerjee. Ruben has had a storied career through Indian journalism. He's worked for the Indian Express, India Today. He's gone abroad to Qatar and worked for Al Jazeera. He's come back to work for the Hindustan Times. And most recently, he was the group editor of the Outlook group of magazines. Unfortunately, he was unceremoniously sacked from Outlook, and we'll discuss more about that. But we'll also talk about the larger story of Indian media. You know, this is something that they hear day in and day out, that Indians are unhappy with the media, that the media is seen to not be doing its job, that it's seen to be partisan, that it's seen to be sold out. And really, this is a very troubling set of circumstances because remember, there is no democracy without a free press. So, in the course of the next hour, we'll discuss what exactly is wrong with Indian media and maybe even try and find out how we can fix it. Hi, Ruben. Very pleased to welcome you to Scroll Ideas.
Thank you. Great pleasure to be here.
So, I'm going to dive right into it. After the COVID second wave, you had published a cover which said the government of India is missing. And that caused a bit of a kerfuffle, that caused a bit of a controversy. Tell us what happened during that, after you published that cover, Ruben.
Well, that cover, we thought that I, as the editor-in-chief of Outlook, felt that it was a very legitimate cover and we had to do it. Because at that point of time, if you recall, people were dropping dead for want of oxygen and healthcare. We couldn't get even hospital beds.
Terrible situation, yeah.
Yeah, that was a terrible, terrible situation. And people were dying, and they were dying, and we were seeing it's our lived experience that people were dying for want of oxygen, for the minimum hospital bed. So, and there is no denying that fact. And at that point of time, we all went through that, and we felt that the government of India was missing. And that is exactly what our cover said, missing. And at the bottom of it, we said, name it. We made it look like a police missing poster.
Right.
So name Government of India, age 7 years, because the Government of India, Modi's government was 7 years old last year,
Right.
and inform citizens of India. And it was a very objective cover, and we had a fantastic package inside. Pratap Bhanu Mehta, Shashi Tharoor. We even had a BJP functionary writing his side of the story, Vijay Chautaiwale, because I've always believed in all sides journalism. So this cover, it went super viral. I've still not been able to figure out what goes viral and what doesn't go viral. Right? But this was super viral. Okay, people were changing their WhatsApp profile pictures to this. So the cover became a kind of a hugely accepted fashionable thing for the next couple of weeks. And we came under pressure, and I was told in that many words by my the management that they are under pressure, and some kind of pressure which they are unable to handle. So I was asked to lie low. So the job being done, I lay low. Then the next day, as always, as is the practice with Outlook magazine, we come out with the print edition, and the next day it goes online. It's the entire issue is uploaded online, from cover to the whole magazine per se. But that issue, there they made an exception. The cover went. The cover was not uploaded. That was the controversial cover, that missing cover. It was missing. That itself became another controversy because politicians like Moha Moitro noticed it, and then they tweeted it. Then Shekhar Gupta's The Print did a story. Why is Outlook's missing cover missing from online? So it became another controversy. But it was all happening because the management was under kind of pressure. And so there obviously was a kind of a cover-up. The previous night, when I came under pressure, uh, there was an attempt to have a second cover printed and which can be uploaded online. And I said, no, you can't change the cover. Simply, you can't. So the second best option that they did was they hid the cover. So when the magazine was uploaded online, the cover was not there. Okay, so they had something else. So all kind of things happened. And in fact, uh, in my introduction, I guess Shoaib, you missed out. Like all this is described in great details in my book. And I guess this is why we are talking today. It's
Right.
editor missing, the media in today's India. And it's all there because it's just not. I have written this book because, see, to be very honest, I didn't expect this kind of an ending in Outlook. Okay, like it's the worst possible ending for any employee. Leave apart an editor. Uh, so I wasn't prepared for this, but I did what I had to do, stand up to whatever my convictions are. But then there is a larger question why I wrote this book. There is a larger issue at stake. What about free media, the independence of media? What about our free speech? How
Right.
much of it do we really retain? So all this is actually there. While I narrate my own experiences, it's a part memoir. I have also tackled all these larger issues which India's media today faces, and these are very very important because these are we are facing an existential crisis now as a medium.
So one of the things that you mentioned in your book, Ruben, is that in a way none of this is exactly new. Journalism is a public-facing profession. It's a profession that's interfaces with politics. It's a profession that interfaces with power. It's supposed to speak truth to power. So there's always been pressure on it. There's always been pressure on it from proprietors. There's always been pressure on it from politicians. There's always been pressure on it from governments. But is there something new that you're seeing in India now? Is it worse today than it was a few decades back? Has the intensity of it increased?
Yeah, it's not my case. It's never been my case that whatever that's happening with the media is just a post 2014 phenomenon, that
Right.
ever since BJP and Modi came into power, things have really gone down the drains. No. We have all grown up with the fact that emergency happened, and I think it was Advani who famously said that when the media was asked to bend, they were crawling.
Right.
And 80s and 90s, when we were growing up, we always knew of editors and journalists who were pro-government, who were very sycophantic, who would beat the government's drum. And then there was also a section which was vociferously critical of the government. So there was pressure. And it so also so happened that like Outlook itself and its owners, Rajan Rahejas, they own Outlook. Like they came under, they faced the music. In I think it was 2003, Vinod Mehta was the editor of Outlook, and they did a cover story, very very damaging. It was basically the story focused on Vajpayee's PMO, the Prime Minister's office, and it talked about the kind of influence peddling that was happening within the PMO, led by two bureaucrats and the adopted son-in-law of Mr. Vajpayee. Very
Right. I
damaging
remember
story
that.
against the
Yeah.
PMO. And
Yeah.
if I remember, Vinod Mehta later said that it was the most dishonest, corrupt PMO India has ever had. So, given the kind of uh, the damage it did, it obviously consequences followed. And the
Right.
Raheja's outlook was raided. There were raids across the country.
Right.
And the same Rahejas faced the music. So they had all kinds of cases against them. So they had to go and sit and stand and for hours together for days on end. So all that happened. But uh, I think things, the intensity has kind of, the scale of this harassment or the fear has multiplied now because, and very recently, a couple of days ago, I met a very important BJP functionary. I wouldn't like to name him right now. And he happened to be a former journalist. And he said something interesting. He says that laws of the land have become more stringent. So
Right.
earlier, say suppose in 2003 or 2004, when the Rajas were kind of uh, they had the whip cracked on them, they possibly had say income tax or ED, whichever organization was investigating them, they would have said, okay, you have to give 1,000 crores fine or 2,000 crores, you have black money, whatever. Okay, but then the money was never confiscated or seized at that point of time. The matter went to the court, and that the court would decide 10 years, 15 years, 20 years, whatever time it takes.
Right.
Apparently, now the laws have changed, and now if, say, suppose ED or income tax, and I need to check this out, if they make a slap you with an allegation, the accusation that, okay, you have not paid for 5,000 crores, so you have to pay 5,000 crores. So they actually can go ahead and seize the money. Okay,
Wow.
so without waiting for court verdict or anything. So imagine, I am a businessman, I am a owner of a media organization, and I also have other businesses. And suddenly I have an allegation, accusation thrown at me saying that you have
Hmm.
you have black money of 10,000 crores. My 10,000 crores is immediately confiscated and then subject to a court case which will go on for stretch for 10 years, 15 years. So that will cripple my business. So I
Right.
can well understand where these owners' fears are coming from. So things are bad, and I guess so. It's not only the owners. I think the owners have far less, and I'm talking of traditional media owners. I'm not talking of Scroll or Print or
Right.
News Laundry or News Minute. Uh, I'm talking of the traditional mainstream media, like which we grew up with.
Cool.
I think
Yeah.
but for one or two exceptions, I think the owners of our traditional media have far less appetite of taking on the government or getting into kind of problems
Hmm.
uh, than they used to have earlier. So they are very, very risk averse now, and they don't want to go down this road of taking on the government and then have their money seized or confiscated or whatever. So I think, and to a very large extent, that's my takeaway from my stint as editor of Outlook. For traditional media, if you're a journalist working with the traditional mainstream media, your red line, yours red line is shrinking because the owners have less and less appetite for honest and brave journalism. So
Right.
that is
So
the
it's a double whammy. The government is getting stricter, plus there is
yes,
in a way a conflict of interest with
yes.
when you have an
And very
industrialist
interesting,
owner. Right.
and very interestingly, this same BJP functionary, former journalist, also had something very interesting to say. It's not only just the owners. Even now, the message has gone down the line. So the editors are also not willing to stick their neck out. So, and in fact,
Right.
this gentleman, particular gentleman, said that most of the editors now these days are being paid to compromise. So basically, what do you do if your owner doesn't have the appetite? If the owner doesn't back you up, then you don't stand a chance. You will be out. And so, and that precisely happened uh, with me. So I think my experience, my own personal journey has kind of reflected the kind of heightened problems that the media in India faces.
And is it also exacerbated by the fact that media itself, in some cases, is not profitable, so it has to depend on these industrialists for patronage?
Exactly.
Uh,
In fact, my
the
book,
business
Editor
model
Message,
is broken in some ways.
yes, exactly. That is what this
Readers would
book,
not pay for news.
yeah, this book exactly talks about all this.
Right.
The business model is broken, right?
Right.
And so I don't think, but for a one or two exceptions, anybody is making money. So you are entirely dependent on ads and events, government sponsored events. So you'll have to curry favors to make
Right.
money. And also because the same, so the advertisement kitty is the same, and there are so many players chasing the same kitty.
Right.
So there is increased competition. So it's a kind of a vicious cycle, and then these algorithms have come into play. So you'll have to have clickbait, sensational news, so that you garner more eyeballs. To get eyeballs, you get into sensationalizing
Sensational
news,
news.
and
Right.
you need to sensationalize because you got to have a bigger traffic. It's only when you have bigger traffic you get ads. So it's a kind of a vicious cycle that the media has got into. And you ask me what the solution, I really don't know. Like very few in the world has actually cracked this, been able to cracked this mystery. Like New York Times, of course, it has. Uh, like we at Outlook, like we were under tremendous financial pressure. Okay, like
Right.
we couldn't even pay salaries, and apart from salary cuts, which was heightened by this COVID pandemic, the
Right.
financial troubles that we had. So we had salary cuts, and then we even then with salary cuts we had salary areas. So there was a time in Outlook during the COVID pandemic, the areas had mounted to 5 months. So for 5 months, people had not got paid. But then, thankfully, and I'm very proud of the fact that the team really rallied around, and the kind of journalism we did was absolutely fantastic. I'm so proud of the team, and that's my biggest regret. Like having ceased to be the Outlook editor, the only thing that I miss is my team. They did fantastic, brilliant team of reporters and editors that I had, and I had this great privilege of working with them. So the point is, we tried many things like subscription. Like people do talk about subscriptions, or
Right.
in fact, we did. In fact, we were the pioneers. Like in Outlook, like we did got this like pay per use. Like you get into a story, you pay 5 rupees, 5 or 2 rupees, 1 rupee. You price each story and you pay
So you
as you go
basically
ahead.
sell each story rather than the entire
Like
entire week's
that
subscription.
was also another
Right.
package that we were trying to experiment. And
Right.
yeah, but then the point is, see, you are not New York Times. Okay, so say suppose your monthly bill comes to about, I'm just
Throwing out a figure. Right.
throwing out a figure. Say your monthly bill is
Right.
50 crores. Okay,
Right.
your salaries and all. Now with subscription, like if you are selling 1,000 subscription, 2,000 rupees each, so you are making only 2 lakh rupees, right? So you most of these organizations will end up selling 5,000 subscriptions. Even that's a very high figure. Like how many subscriptions do you sell? So even if you are selling, you are not selling, they don't translate into that kind of a volume which actually you're spending,
And
right? So
sustain the
that's the
business. Right.
so pay per use. Like okay, fine, you are doing 10,000 rupees a day, but then at the end in the month you are spending 50 lakhs. You have to cover 50 lakhs. So even if you are doing 10,000 a day, which is a very it's additional revenue for you, right?
Right.
Otherwise people were reading it for free, but you are only covering 3 lakhs in the end of a month, but you need 50 lakhs.
Right.
So the volume is the challenge. So for a smaller organization, subscription, pay-per-use, they make sense. But for larger
Right.
organizations, you need that kind of volume. So that
Right.
kind of volume is not happening. And that's the biggest worry.
Another thing that I wanted to come back to, Ruben, is that you had mentioned this government events, government ads. So I think a lot of people think of government control of media as something very punitive, and certainly it is a part of that. As you know, you had pointed out the example of Mr. Vajpayee's government raiding the Rahejas back around a decade and a half back. But I've also noticed that governments exercise a lot of control just using their own ads. So they can choose to put ads in your newspaper or your TV channel. Is that a big way in which government controls, especially legacy media?
Of course they do. Like say, suppose if you are making money from
Right,
the government, so you're beholden to that government, right? So you try
right,
and kind of ensure that you don't rock that boat. See, for me, the challenge was, and I'll be very, very honest, as an editor, you are responsible for your team and you want the team to earn their livelihood, right?
right,
See, I had, when during the time when we could not, the group organization could not pay salaries, I have had instances where my a sub editor has got thrown out of her house because she couldn't pay the rent on time, or uh, the child of my one of my reporters could not go to school because the school fees had not been paid. So as the editor, you feel that you are responsible for them, and that is where uh, that is one reason why I was okay with this, because I had to make money at the end of the day because the
true,
livelihoods were involved. So again, it's a kind of a vicious cycle. Like not the best possible solution, but what do you do in such an eventuality? You are trying to
right,
mop up additional revenue from subscriptions and pay per use and whatever, but for the time being and for the next foreseeable future, you will be dependent on ads. And a large chunk of those ads will come from the government as of now, like UP, and every time there is an
right,
election, there is a bonanza, right?
Right.
So there are more ads coming in. So you need to, now you can turn around and say, well, that's not right. But what am I supposed to do? I have to make those choices. But should my people, my staff, my colleagues have a decent livelihood, or they get thrown out of their houses? So the choice is mine, and took the call. Like I've written in my book, I have personally gone and met Yogi Adityanath twice.
Right.
Yes, it's true. And every time I went, both the occasions I said, Yogi ji, and to be very honest, he agreed. He didn't disagree with me. I said, publicity to karunga, but koi illegal kam nahi karunga. And he nodded.
Right.
He said, fine. And which we did. Like, we were making a lot of money out of Uttar Pradesh. Like, Uttar Pradesh government during the run up to the election was giving ads to everyone. So, obviously, we also got a lot of ads. But at the same time, we didn't spare them. Like, Hathras happened. And I
Right.
think I remember, and it's all on record, I wrote one of the most scathing editorials against the UP government. So, now to what extent you can still carry on and protect your with a spine of your own, that depends. That's, you're constantly pushing the envelope, right? And a big advertiser doesn't like it, he will hit back, and he has all the right
Tools at his disposal, right? If
yeah,
he's
the
paying the
disposal.
salaries, right?
All that he needs to do is just close the tap, right?
Right.
And then you feel the pinch, and you suffocate, and your people will start getting thrown out of their houses because rents can't be paid on time. So we have very little
And
leverage.
it's such a painless way to control the media, because if you use
Yeah.
punitive methods, that will actually make news, that will create a splash. But if you withdraw an ad, you know, I mean, a government has a right not to advertise in an outlet. So it's such a painless and, in a way, cunning way to control the media. And I
So
think,
I think we have become more and more vulnerable. There are a whole lot of issues which have contributed to this
right,
vulnerability. One, the one side, the broken, the business model is broken. The owners have less appetite. Yeah, journalistic scruples. Well, it has happened with every sphere in life. Even these scruples are kind of loosening. Uh, so all kind of things are happening. So there is less and less appetite for true, honest, brave journalism, and even these algorithms, whatever money you are making, by 80%, 90% of being cornered by Google and Facebook. So you are just left to fight over crumbs. So everything put together is adding on, and
right.
so
In fact, what you said, you've had such a long career in journalism. I remember growing up, journalism was an absolutely high prestige profession. It was a, quote unquote elite profession. And right now, what you're describing is a very horrific state of circumstances. I think most journalists in India will recognize this. The public perception of journalism itself has changed. It's seen as now a compromised profession. In some extreme cases, you would even have people abusing journalists as partisan, as quote unquote prostitutes, and so on and so forth. This change, is that something you've seen through your career of journalism dropping in prestige as a profession in India?
see, to be very honest, I'm still very, very proud that I am a journalist, and I'm still a lot of I still have a lot of written, lot of pride in journalism.
Yeah,
And I think some of my fellow journalists, I don't subscribe to this idea that there are no good journalists in the India anymore. There
right,
are enough number of good journalists who are doing extremely good work, including you,
right.
Shoaib Daniyal. And I can name so many of them. Like last 4 days in the morning, the first thing I have been reading is Ritika Chopra in Indian Express about this
Yeah,
NCRT
superb
textbook. So
series on.
superb
Yeah,
series.
right.
Okay, like, and I can, like, people say, oh, this is end of journalism. No, no, but there are lots of journalists who are doing phenomenal good work, and I can name so many of them. Okay, uh, like even in my book, I've named people like Shomesh Jha and Tanushree Pandey, that girl who bravely filmed that
Yeah,
Hathras thing. And
yeah,
I can name so many of them, Jyoti Jadhav. And personally, half of them I don't even know them. I've never met them. Right.
right.
I'm very impressed with the kind of journalism that Article 14 is doing, News Laundry is doing. Some of the stories are great. Like even very recently, Indian Express story that this IS bureaucrat who used to close down the stadium for to take his dog for a walk. It's a great story, right? They're
Superb
fantastic journey.
story, right?
Yeah. So I don't believe in the fact that journalism is dead. I believe in the fact that journalism is kicking in life. It's the problem is the owners are failing us and maybe the editors are failing us. Okay. So I think the problem lies there. Like if the
So this is
owners
leading to the drop in public perception.
and this obviously we have bad apples like any other profession there
Of
are,
course.
and because of social media and they are on TV, so it gets amplified, right? That
Mm.
tutu mene that happens in the mindless things that happen on TV and whatever, and the polarization that has happened. So I think it's got amplified, but and so obviously people have a kind of a notion that oh journalism is finished in India. Yes, journalism is uh, in a very very bad shape, in a tight corner. But I refuse to believe that journalism is not happening anymore.
Right.
Great journalism is happening. But at the same time, yes, we are terribly, terribly threatened. And we are under siege. Now, how you get out of your way, that's the challenge. Yeah.
Right. I'm going to bookmark this thing about viability of journalism, and I'm going to come back to that. One thing that you spoke about, there being good and bad journalists, and you spoke about social media. One of the things uh, that has arisen, I don't know, maybe it was always there, but we'll let you unpack that for us. Is the fact that there are now celebrity journalists. There are people who sometimes are the story, uh, and maybe that is exacerbated by social media. What's your take in that? Is that an inevitable outcome of the sort of world we live in, or is that harming journalism? Is that a necessary part of journalism? What's your take on celebrity journalists?
See, celebrity journalism, it's kind of inevitable. Like if you are working on TV, so obviously you
Right,
become your face famous, very famous, all right?
right,
So, and you gain a lot of traction and all that. So, I have nothing per se against a celebrity journalist, provided that journalist is using her fame for larger good and for journalism.
right,
So, I have no problem. Like, say, suppose Barkha Dutt is famous, I still believe like the kind of journalism that Barkha Dutt did during COVID, hitting the road and
very
traveling
much
all
so.
across the country, and now she's come up with a book. I think the work she has done is phenomenal. So and she is a celebrity journalist, and I don't think we can uh, grudge that. Uh, and she is. But then if a celebrity journalist, like I also know of a celebrity journalist who I would not name, that person has hired a PR agency, okay, to market her to market for self
Right,
marketing.
right, right,
I have huge problem with that because if you are prioritizing yourself uh, over issues and individual over issues, then there is something grievously wrong with your journalism. And but then that's happening. So and then there are some celebrity journalists like they are very on social media they are celebrities, but I know they haven't really done anything remarkable or worthwhile in last 5 years or 10 years, okay, or maybe more, but they are celebrities for some whatever reason. So I wouldn't like celebrity journalism is fine. Like I really it doesn't matter to me, bother me as much. Uh, I think as long as we do our job honestly, diligently, and we face the challenges, I'm fine. But yeah, but I have no personal like I wouldn't say celebrity journalism. I have a huge grudge against them. Some of them deserve it, like Ravish Kumar. Who can deny that he deserved the magazine or
right.
right? And
It's how
some
you
of
use that celebrity power
whether you
basically
are
is the
using
question.
that for the right
Right,
cause, because if you are using it only to promote yourself
right,
and then hire a PR agency to market yourself,
right.
then I think that's something very, very wrong. And that's happened. So,
And you mentioned TV news. Now, TV news is something that um, I think most Indians consume. I think print would be, or at least they occupies much more mind space. TV news has especially become a bit, let's put it to put it mildly, become a bit crazy nowadays. Uh, Part of that, I think, is to do with the fact that there are now these celebrity anchors on, I think, both sides of the aisle, but maybe especially in Hindi and English. Uh, There's also something that you mentioned earlier, that you need to be sensational. Plus, you can't really rub the government the wrong way. But even taking all those factors into account, the amount of vitriol and hate that's there on TV news, what's the explanation for that, you think?
Hate sells.
Right,
Decency does not sell in this country.
right,
Okay, so and hate sells, and people get hooked onto hate.
right,
And I think again, as we discussed earlier, it's again the problem, or the larger issue that we are confronted with. Like again, the
right.
owners have less appetite. The business model is broken. We all know no television channel is making money. The only money they make is through government ads and government sponsorships and government uh, events. At the same time, because they don't have money, they are no more investing in news collection gathering.
Much easier
So
to do a debate.
so you do a debate, you get four people and then make them fight. And then again, you want sensationalism because you want to grab eyeballs. If only you get eyeballs, you get ads. So, and what is the best way of getting ads, getting eyeballs? Make it as hateful, as vitriolic, as mindless as possible. So finally, it's no more news, it's theater, right? Drama. So, and that
Form of entertainment, basically. It's
so it's a form of, you
WWE.
don't know what
Right.
is hitting you. To be very honest, like I have given up on television news, and people may say that, well, I'm biased because I've had a print
Do you
background.
watch television news? You don't watch
No,
television news.
I've stopped. I've stopped.
Right.
Maybe see my like maybe in a in a fortnight I would have watched one news channel for maybe 5 minutes because I can't stand it any longer. Like I go into these channels, like the famous, infamous ones, just to see what kind of rubbish they're doing,
The one
and then
thing
after 2 minutes I can't digest,
you
so I
can't.
move in.
One thing that I've noticed, one very interesting thing I've noticed is that this phenomena that you're describing exists far more in quote unquote national TV media than in state media. I really don't see so much craziness on, say, Bengali or Marathi TV as opposed to
Honestly, yeah,
Indian.
maybe you're right, because like I do watch at times, like because I have an Orissa background, I generally keep myself informed about what's happening
Oh
in
yeah,
Orissa or even
Odisha.
Bengal.
So is
Yeah,
it that
TV.
bad in Odisha TV as is it
No,
in
no, no,
Noida?
no. No, I don't think we have such vitriolic.
Right,
Uh, no, I don't think so. I can't think of any. So I don't. I hope they don't fall for this.
right.
But
So this is like a dynamic that is
what
a
I
very
watch and
national dynamic.
what I
This
immensely enjoy
right,
is that news laundry program on this. They do a weekly critique of television news. I find
right,
it hilarious.
right. I
Like
think Manisha Pandey hosts it.
yeah,
It's
and it's
yeah,
good. It's very nice.
right. Yeah, I
But
think
then
Indian.
what
I think that's really a testament to how crazy Indian TV news is, that there is now a
No,
show. Which
but then the
yeah,
problem is nobody is going to change their ways, mend their ways, because they are thick-skinned. They will brazen it out because the stakes are so high. See, the owners, the editors, the anchors, they know these are our stakes. So, however you criticize or make fun of me, I'm not going to change my way, right? I'm going to
if
do what I'm doing.
that's where the money and the power is, then yeah,
So they
that's
will
a
brazen it
tough
out.
thing to change, right?
They will try and brazen it out. Like I see, from Outlook, from with my case, like I was sacked, and my sacking was absolutely malafide. But they will brazen it out because they had to do it, right? So
Right. Uh, One of the things that TV is broken, but unfortunately there's a lot wrong with print also, and we both belong to print. One of the things that I grew up in the age of magazines. We used to get, I think, three magazines in my house. We used to get India Today, and then when Outlook came up and it made waves, we started getting Outlook. I think Outlook was the first magazine to be a weekly. I think India Today at that time was, if I remember correctly, a
fortunately,
fortnightly, right? And Outlook changed the game. We used to also get Frontline. The age of magazines right now in India seems to have kind of ended. You really don't, or it's petering out. In fact, in your book itself, you write that there was a lot of pressure for you guys to switch to online. It has online killed magazines? Do people not have time to sit and read magazines? What's happening here?
no. What has happened is with this OTT and television boom and all that, the people's reading habits have changed, and we also know that even books, like
Right,
people are reading less and less.
right,
Uh, And then the younger generation, like my daughter and all, they don't pick up a magazine. They read it on their phone or whatever. So reading habits have changed. Uh, so to that extent, yes, magazine readership has also kind of shrunk. But I have also a different take. I think the magazine themselves have also been partly to be blamed,
Right.
because let's generally, and I, this is not a critique of my colleagues or peers or anyone, but there has been a general bankruptcy of ideas across the board,
Right.
right? So if you are a magazine and you are not doing anything exceptionally different, and you are just covering the news that has already I have already read in the daily newspaper or watched on TV, and at the end of the week you are giving me the same stuff, so obviously you're going to put me off, right? And that, I think, has largely happened because we were not different in our content. So, and I don't know what happened. Maybe again, because the business model was broken, didn't have the money or the resources to invest. So it showed up in the quality of magazine that we were bringing out. And I'm not talking of only Outlook or some other magazine. I'm talking of in general, uh, magazines had ceased doing great stuff for quite some time, and they had
Right.
become too predictable. So I think that kind of there was a gradual erosion in readership, alongside, like, yeah, people's readership habits are changing. They have now OTT, they have other forms of
So both a
getting their
push and
news.
a pull factor. Right.
Yeah, but if you say that is magazine dead, no, magazine is very much kicking and alive. And my best example is my missing issue. It
Right.
became super viral. People were talking about it from
Right.
Turkey to Germany. People were calling me up,
Right.
like, "What kind of magazine is this? Oh, wow, great!" So obviously, so you give them something worthwhile, and if you don't do it differently, obviously, people are not going to take note of it. So I think it worked both ways. Reading habits have changed, and also magazines took things too easy, I guess, and maybe. Uh, for the owners, it's television news which got television, their television empire or investments got more priority. But I am still a great believer that if you give different content, good content, there is still a readership for that.
And tell us. So you worked in newspapers actually in a way that minus your Al Jazeera stint and Outlook stint. You're a core newspaper man. You worked in the Indian Express. You also worked in Hindustan Times. Uh, Between your Indian Express stint right at the beginning and HT, where you were a senior editor, uh, a sort of revolution took place in print media, where let's call it the Times of India model, where marketing departments were really put in charge in a way, and editors were, or the chief editor was maybe made less powerful. How is that a necessary change? Again, is that just responding to what readers want, or did newspaper men and women miss a trick over here?
I think it's got to do with the business decisions that the owners make.
Right.
Like Times of India, we know. Even the owner once was quoted as saying that I'm not in the business of news, I'm in the business of advertisement, right?
Right.
Uh, in HT, see, as I have described in the book, like we had an in between, like I was there for 2.5 years, and for 1.5 years, it was the Bobby Ghosh was the editor in chief, and he's a quintessential solid editor. Okay,
Right.
that is. So at that point of time, we really didn't feel the kind of pressures from the other departments, the management, the marketing department, this and that. All that used to definitely happen. I'm sure it happened, but they were more behind the scene and not
Right.
in your face kind of a thing.
Right.
So we were never under pressure. I wouldn't know what's happening now, but yes, uh, from my Outlook experience also, and I can say I think the line between editorial, like, see, editorial used to be sacrosanct. Even in Outlook, there was a time when it was sacrosanct. I
Right.
think that line is gone. Okay, now uh, You will have
There's no Chinese wall between the editorial and the
no,
marketing
the wall
department,
has
right?
vanished. The wall has been totally broken down.
Right.
Now it's the management guys who are sitting on or chairing edit meetings
Right.
and telling you what story to do and what story not to do. Okay, it's happening. And I'm not being very specific, but please
Right.
check it out. It's happening. Okay, where the CEO is chairing the edit meeting. Okay, and the editor is playing second fiddle. So, as my BJP friend said, the editors, many of the editors are now being paid to just to compromise. So the editor is compromising. Now, I can't imagine being an editor and let the CEO chair my edit meeting. I can't,
Right.
like, maybe I just can't imagine this happening with me. I would
Right.
better walk and not be an editor anymore. But then that's fact of life. It's happening. So, and these are personal, individual calls people have to take. Uh, I'm not saying that I am the guy who is absolutely right and everybody else is wrong. But these are subjective assessments that people have to calls that people have to take, and then their background there. Each individual has a different background. Like maybe I can walk, but then the other editor cannot walk because he has financial compulsions, family
Hmm.
reasons to
Hmm.
have a job. So I understand all that. So our responses to such situations will be different. I understand. Like if I could walk, I know that maybe the next person cannot walk, uh, has enough reasons to hang on to a job. I understand that. And that this makes this problem very, very complex. So if you say, please give me a solution to this, an antidote to this, I don't think I have a single bullet to solve the entire problem. So a complex situation requires complex solutions.
Yeah, I think without enough revenue coming from readers, this is very difficult to
I,
solve. You will be dependent on ads.
I honestly believe that readers should start paying for content.
Right.
I honestly believe. But it will be much more difficult to get it done. It's easier than done
Said then
because
done. Right.
one, why should they? If I put my content behind paywall, they will go to some other platform which is free. And also, the moment I monetize my content, I put it under a paywall, however negligible it could be, 1 rupee, 2 rupee, 5 rupee, 10 rupee, whatever. But then
Right.
that content also has to be worth it, right? It has to be very, very good. So you can't give junk uh, against money. So, and as I said, like even if your content is good and people are still buying it, this challenge still remains because you need that kind of volume to cover
Right.
your expenses and make a profit, right? So that volume is not coming. Maybe a large traditional media like for Times of India and Indian Express, it works. Others are, I think, struggling. So because you need to have that kind of volume to cover your
To be able
bases.
to pull it off. Right. Uh, the other thing that I want to know about media is that you worked in the state, you worked in Odisha for a long time, you worked in Delhi. Is there a difference in political freedoms at the state level and at the national level? Do state governments put more pressure, less pressure? How what's the dynamic? Because sometimes why I'm asking this question is sometimes a lot of our conversations remain rooted in national media when actually a lot of this journalism is actually happening in the state capital or even in the districts in maybe languages which are not even English. They could be in whatever Bengali, Odia, Marathi, Tamil, and so on. Is there a difference that you've noticed in
Yeah.
how this works?
No, earlier it used to be different because I had worked in Hyderabad as a reporter. I had worked in
Right,
Odisha. I had
right,
worked in Calcutta and
right,
based in Calcutta, and I had covered the Northeast
right,
and for a very considerable period of time. Things used to be different because if you are in a state capital in a smaller state, you are really sought after by the politician. The chief minister
right,
will call you. You will know everyone by name. So I think say uh, a correspondent of a national newspaper has phenomenal clout in a state capital, like say
right,
Madhya Pradesh or Chhattisgarh. Like they used to be folklore, those kind of correspondents, and we know. But things aren't the same as of now. Like I'll tell you, I'm also very glued into see these politicians now. They are not generally speaking, and I'm not naming them, these politicians don't expect you, the present day generation politicians, they are not just satisfied with your loyalty.
Right.
They are demanding 200% loyalty. They don't want 100% loyalty. They want 200% loyalty.
Right.
Okay, so you can't even so, and they are very impatient with any kind of criticism or even the whimper of a uh, disagreement. So, if you go to Calcutta, does the press have any freedom? It's difficult. Uh, in Orissa, I think free press, kind of like the ownership pattern there in the state. Every second media house is owned by the politicians, and most of them,
Politicians.
majority of them are aligned with the government in power. Okay,
You don't even have
and
to go to the intermediary of an industrialist like in Delhi. Like it's directly owned by a politician.
yeah,
Right.
and then also like I think generally because and now that the government knows, like we control the media, so they have little respect for the journalists because they know the owners. The owners are in their group, in their camp.
Pocket. Right.
So the journalists are treated very shabbily. For last, I suppose, for 2 years, under the pretext of COVID, from the state secretariat, journalists have been barred. I think it's more than 2 years.
Yeah.
Everybody else can go, journalists can't go. So that shows the lack of respect for journalists. Like they just don't really care. In any case, we are going to manage you,
Right.
right? So how does it matter? So and so
I think what's also happened to some extent why this has led to a drop is that I think now politicians have a lot of other avenues to connect with the public.
exactly,
And if you go back 30 years, the only avenue was the press.
exactly.
So I think,
Like
yeah, we've
Modi,
lost the
Narendra
exclusivity.
Modi, he hasn't had a press conference,
Right.
but then he is a great communicator, right?
Right.
Without having a single press conference, uh,
He
he's
gets his
done it.
message across.
He communicates. So even with the states, I'm told that the scene is very bad in Andhra and Telangana, right? Like local journalists tell me horrifying stories. Like if you can't really criticize or open your mouth against the state government,
Wow.
so that there is a problem. But then it doesn't get that kind of attention because we are all like Delhi based and we can't look beyond our. Uh, so that's unfortunate. But I think situation is changing. But I still believe that some of the best journalists in India are in the states.
Very much.
They are very good journalists we have. The only problem is like it's the tyranny of distance because they are not in Delhi. They don't get the kind of platforming that they deserve or the kind of
Right.
exposure that they deserve. It's more or less kind of monopolized by people who are in Delhi, closer to the television studios. So you get away with the kind of all the limelight. But fantastic! Like I know of so many correspondents, state correspondents who are fantastic journalists.
I think that one of the things that I remember, I think a year or two back, Cobra Post had done a sting. They tried to pay journalists. They tried to set up a sting where they pay journalists for news, and a lot of national media outlets fell for it. And I think there were two outlets that did not. I can't remember the name of the second one, but one of them was this Bengali newspaper called Bortoman, which is very staid, very old style, daily newspaper that comes out from
It
Calcutta,
is
the
true.
district.
They were owned by Borun Sengupta, started by Borun Sengupta, that
Right,
famous journalist.
right.
He's dead. Uh, but Botman is hugely popular. I think it should be
Very
number
popular.
2 or number 3 now. Yeah.
I think it's
I
number
think
two
it
in
must be
Bengal.
the number 2 now. Yeah.
Right. So yeah, I found that very instructive as to how maybe good journalism can and does exist in states.
No, because see, I was the national affairs editor at Hindustan Times, and my job was to run the National Nation News Network.
Right.
So, and that it gave me this opportunity of interacting with our outstation reporters, and some of them are phenomenal reporters. Like, and I have narrated some of the stories in my book,
Very
Editor
much so.
Missing, and phenomenal stories. But then the tragedy is like they are not really celebrated or recognized. And then we are told, oh, India, there are no good journalists. Journalism is dead. No. And these are the
Not
guys
at
who are
all.
actually risking their lives and limbs and bones to tell you stories. So I would
On
only say
that
that.
bittersweet note, we're completely out of time. Thank you so much. I think this was a great conversation. Ruben's book is Editor Missing. This is a conversation that we're going to have again and again about the state of the media in India. Remember, there's nothing more important than a free press to a democracy. Thank you so much for joining us. It was a pleasure conversing. Thank you for watching, everyone.
Thank you.